This is a big ET Now exclusive. We understand from our sources in the government that guidelines will shortly be issued for social media in India. These guidelines will cover social media companies, the intermediaries, whether they are in instant messaging, social networking, microblogging, instant messaging, short video platforms. In a nutshell, all of social media will be covered by these guidelines. Having said that, we are being told by our sources that the government will make a distinction between small companies and the big companies. There will be a threshold that will be decided on the basis of the user base. The bigger social media companies, therefore, will be subject to stricter guidelines. There will be stricter obligations that they will have to comply with. So in a nutshell, if I can put it very simply for all of you tuning in, the government of India getting set to come out with guidelines that will cover the big tech, whether it is the Googles, the Facebook, WhatsApp, Instagram, Twitter, but all social media intermediaries in the country. What we're being told is that these guidelines are also being issued and being worked upon to empower users. So let me tell you what that basically means. The government is quite keen that social media intermediaries have a proper grievance redressal mechanism in the country. So whether they're a Facebook or a brand new startup in social networking, they may be required to have a proper system for public grievances so that users can make complaints, users can reach out to these companies, whether it is to take down photographs, take down, if somebody is abusing them, any issues that they may be facing. The government is quite keen that there should be a robust grievance redressal mechanism. We're also being told that the social media intermediaries will be given proper guidelines to verify users. Will this be done on an Indian mobile number? Will it be good enough to link with your email? Is something we'll have to watch out for in the fine print. Why will they want to do this? The minute the accounts are verified, the view is it should help in weeding out bots. It should help in spreading of misinformation, spreading of fake news, should prevent harassment as well as trolling. The government is coming out with guidelines for social media. You might ask, what about content moderation? We are being told that the existing mechanism that is in place for the government to ask social media platforms to take down unlawful content, that mechanism could be made more robust. All of this will be done with guidelines. It may not be, and the issuance of rules, it may not be done immediately with the amendment to the Information Technology Act. I'm going to be discussing this big ET Now exclusive with one of the experts that we have in the country, Apar Gupta, who's joining us live right here on ET Now. Apar, it's always a pleasure talking to you. Does the government have any business to regulate, to come out with guidelines for social media intermediaries? Is India behind the curve, or are other geographies and domiciles already doing this?
So social media regulation and platform accountability are seminal issues of our time. We've seen how social media is a force for expanding a huge democratic framework in which people get to hold people who are public officials in power accountable. However, it has also given rise to disinformation. It's given rise to online abuse. Now, what becomes really important here is that there are a few large social media companies which are based out of Silicon Valley, and what are the kind of regulations which can be made towards protecting user interest. So the clear objectives have to be towards identification of the kind of harm social media is having today, and then thinking about what is the legal design towards approaching them while preserving freedom of speech and expression and privacy. Clearly a very hard task. Now, from what you've just told me, Nayantara, it appears that the government is approaching this problem through a legal instrument which is called the Intermediaries Guidelines Rules. The Intermediaries Guidelines Rules are essentially a form of delegated legislation, which means that they can be just made by a government notification. It doesn't go through parliament. It doesn't have that fleshed out, meaty, well-considered, extensive apparatus which is there usually in legislations like the Information Technology Act, but it's much more like a child of that parent, in which the executive just makes these rules. Now, within these rules, there'll be legal boundaries of how much and what the government can actually do. And from what you're telling me, firstly, in terms of segregation between social media companies or intermediaries per se, and significant or large social media companies, just on the basis of user accounts, it poses a problem. Let's just think about it and run it with some examples. Every website which deals with user generated content, registered or unregistered users, is a large intermediary. For instance, our foundation, the Internet Freedom Foundation, has an online forum. So we are a intermediary. Now, what constitutes a user? Quite often on a lot of platforms, users don't need to actually go and register. And also, most internet platforms now, or even websites, encourage people to give in comments, like news portals, for instance. All of them are intermediaries. Well, all of them have a user threshold which will be based on views, access, registered users. And if they don't register users, will they be compelled to register users? And won't this place entry barriers for all kind of intermediaries? Which is why I would say that even if we presume that there's a positive intent on behalf of the government, and I've not looked or studied these amendments, but still I would voice a degree of hesitation, restraint, given that the proposals, as you are telling me right now, appear to be irrational and can lead to wide harms to free expression and privacy. One final point I would like to indicate. A draft version of these rules was circulated in December 2018, and then it was put to public consultation in 2019. And from what it appears is that today we have something which is drastically different. And at that time also, several experts and commentators said that the best course of action is for the government to publish a white paper, say what it wants to do, because a lot of people in civil society, digital rights, academics, experts and technologists like me, like the people I work with, actually want to strengthen the hand of the government towards protecting individual rights and our fundamental rights as they're intersecting with technology.
Okay, so let's see, we are in fact being told that it's a matter of days before these guidelines are indeed issued. Apart, I'd like to go into some more details on it with you. When somebody talks about social media regulations, fortunately or unfortunately, most people will think it's a gag order of sorts that is coming down from the government. But for what we are being told, that doesn't seem to be the case at all. In fact, the endeavor seems to be to protect the users from the larger players, to give them a recourse to come out with their problem, have a recourse to, complain if they are being harassed and things like that.
So, Nayantara, a lot of the work which the government quite often does with respect to platform regulation suffers from this problem also, because sometimes the prescriptions do come from a positive intent or place of being, but sometimes the actual requirements which are placed in law, firstly, the process is very problematic, and the solutions also which are devised are just done with 3 or 4 large platforms in mind, like the Facebooks or the Googles. For instance, the last version of these rules, which was made public, actually required a proactive censorship requirement in which intermediaries were required to install artificial intelligence to essentially pre-screen any material which is posted online. And if you just remember, in 2012, when another government suggested pre-censorship, which is essentially even prior to you making your Facebook post or a tweet, anything, for the platform to essentially go through it on the basis of an algorithm or a human-based content moderator and decide if it's legal or illegal, is a very, very severe form of censorship. Now, arguably, it does keep out some degrees of misinformation or online abuse, but it has the real tendency of causing a chilling effect, of actually censoring voices on controversial issues. And this is a real problem. For instance, even the earlier versions of these rules similarly had requirements for automated filtering, and automated filtering has been shown time and again to not correctly understand the context. The second is with respect to privacy, for instance, where the government said it wanted to find out who's the originator of a message, which stemmed from the concern that there were a lot of lynchings which were allegedly happening because of disinformation spreading through messaging platforms. And it said the only way we can do it is by ensuring that through WhatsApp, Signal, Telegram, or even now any kind of other encrypted based messaging platform which uses the internet, there is a requirement that the original message which is sent is fingerprinted with the ID of the phone or the device, thereby linking the identity of a person with what's being transmitted over that messaging platform, which is called traceability. This would ordinarily just break encryption. It would
Traceability.
just prevent.
Traceability.
Traceability would break encryption, and encryption is one of the necessities for having private conversations. Right now, a lot of people may say that, oh, WhatsApp is already gathering so much data, and Apar is the one who quite often says that WhatsApp is not secure, move to Signal. But what the government is doing is even worse. WhatsApp is gathering your data with respect to knowing who you're talking to, but the government
No, but Apar, we don't know yet. We don't know yet. Apar. To be fair,
I'm going on the basis of the prior
to be
rules.
fair, we don't know yet
Nayantara,
if the
I'm going on
government
the
will
basis
also
of the
make
previous
traceability
rules.
mandatory in its social media guidelines.
So, Nayantara, I'm going on the basis of the prior
we have to watch out and see
intermediaries
if
guidelines
traceability will
rules.
indeed be a
Hello?
So let's see if it actually comes into the new ones as well. Now, because we're also running out of time, I want to ask you about the fact that the
Yes.
social media guidelines could make the current mechanism of taking down unlawful content more robust. This has been a hot topic for a couple of weeks now because of the entire Twitter controversy. So far, the government has been giving 72 hours to social media intermediaries to take down content which might be unlawful. How can this mechanism be made more robust, and should it be made more robust?
Actually, the mechanism is quite robust because the blocking directions which are given to Twitter are under another provision of law, which is under section 69A. And this is a provision which is a form of delegated legislation being made under 79. So the government essentially needs to give a legal order which is valid and is reasonable. The problem which has occurred in the instance of Twitter essentially pushing back against a direction by the government is that it is risking legal prosecution by saying that we are not going to comply because the order itself is not proportional or reasonable. And it's also emerged because the order is secret. We still don't know what's the order, what are the reasons behind it. And ultimately, the users themselves have also not got a chance to come before the government and essentially put their perspective and give a defense. So they've not got a hearing. So I hope all of these things are incorporated into these intermediaries guidelines. It can actually improve the process. There's definitely
so basically the guidelines should make it more robust. So the guidelines should actually make it more robust. So the guidelines should actually make it more robust when some content has to be taken down, whether it is being directed by the government or it is also being directed by a user who says that this photograph is objectionable or this post is abusive.
So this goes back to the Shreya Singhal judgment, actually, because there's so many requests sent to intermediaries. For instance, if there is a mechanism in which liability occurs on a platform each time a person reports something as abusive or as disinformation, and a platform does not take it down, and it's then liable for that content or that failure to take down, then there would be nothing there on Twitter and Facebook because we know one thing, we all disagree with each other and we will be more than happy to report it as illegal, which is why in the Shreya Singhal judgment, the Supreme Court said it needs to come from the government or from a court order. So when people are dissatisfied, they can move court against a piece of online content. It's the ultimate user who's published that abusive content or that piece of disinformation who needs to be held to account. And this is a global principle. It's not only there in India, it's applicable all over the world because there's been a recognition and there's several problems with Twitter and Google. For instance, they gather so much data. They're not accountable with respect to their content moderation practices. So they need to be accountable and transparent. So there's a lot which needs to be done. My eventual advice, just to keep this short, is we need a white paper. We need structural reforms. And these intermediaries guidelines have the potential.
You want public discourse.
Yes, and just clear, objective, and expert-based inputs which can helpfully advance this in a legal manner. That doesn't at least end up hurting free expression and privacy. And this can be done. And there doesn't need to be a haste in just bringing out rules just because what's happened with Twitter last week.
Right. Okay, we'll leave it at that and we'll wait for the guidelines to be officially announced. We're being told it's a matter of days. In fact, even for OTT platforms, guidelines are likely to be issued, and that is also a matter of days. The big ET now exclusive. The government of India all getting set to come out with guidelines for social media intermediaries. It'll include the big tech. It'll include the new startups that have been mushrooming, whether they're in microblogging, whether they're in short video formats, instant messaging, all of that. So stay tuned to ET Now. We're right on top of this story.